The same age, but I guess not. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really honored to get to speak with Carson and Jeremy. I lost Jeremy somewhere in here. And I'm really glad to get to be with real life people. I mean, this is the way we did this at one time, and it just feels good. I was thinking a moment ago, kind of hearing the buzz of the conversation and how good it feels to just be in a group like this. And some of you I've known for a long time, and some of you just meeting today. I want you to know that my intention, our intention, is for this to be helpful. It's Saturday morning. And I would really like for you to leave and just to say that was helpful, that, or as Keith said, that was encouraging. Okay? So I want you to know that's the intention. There's a 97-room castle in England, the Eastnor Castle. And it was a fortified castle built somewhere between 1810 and 1820. The designer of this castle was Charles Somers Cox. 97 rooms. Built on the backside of the French Revolution. And it was built, according to people who have studied this kind of thing, it was built to look strong. Built to look fortified, built to look fortified. 97 rooms. There's one room in this castle that was designed to be the bedroom of Charles Somers Cox and his wife. Later on, it was just called the State Room. This castle, by the way, still exists. The State Room, and it's where dignitaries would stay. There was a fireplace, or there is a fireplace in the State Room. And there's an interesting Latin inscription on top of the fireplace. That Latin inscription is translated, "Hope knows no defeat." On the wall, there are a few paintings, but two, I'm told, of the more noticeable paintings. One, a painting of the birth of Christ, and the other is a painting of the Last Supper. Hope knows no defeat. I'm told this was the Cox family, sort of their family motto. And I suspect that from the looks of this castle, the fact that it was meant to be strong, fortified against the enemy, they wanted to make sure that there would be no defeat because of that display of strength. Christian people come along and look at something like that and hear these words, "Hope knows no defeat." And we know that the strength is not found in how we look or in our numbers or in how much money we have. But our strength is found in what is on those two pictures in the bedroom. The coming of Christ, the birth of Christ, and the death and the burial and the resurrection and the ascension of the Lord. And so, just beginning this morning, acknowledging that for a lot of churches and a lot of ministers and a lot of elders and just folks who make up the congregations, this can feel like a time of defeat, where we're losing, where ministers are leaving and elders are leaving, and oh my goodness, we were 400 and now we're 200. And we, as a people, go back to our story, because our hope knows no defeat in Christ. It's been an interesting time last couple of years. And I talk to a lot of ministers and elders, and they report such a hard time. There is a health crisis, an economic crisis, a race crisis, political crisis. And here we are, it just seemed like it was one thing after the other. And churches are trying to figure out, what do we do, what do we say? Elders wanted to know, what do we do with this? What do we do during this difficult time? Ministers were asking, my goodness, this is so tiresome, what do we do? And preachers were baffled. If I say something on Sunday morning about something that sounds pretty relevant, they say I said too much, or they say I didn't say enough. John Mark Comer said that prior to the pandemic, most of the criticism he received as a pastor was warranted. He said, I would sometimes speak carelessly, I would have inappropriate sarcasm. Often my leadership shortcomings were on display. And he said all that seemed to change during the pandemic. He said, I felt like some of the criticism was unwarranted, unfair, not even accurate. He said there were assumptions made about my political leanings, accusations made about my priorities during COVID. And then we open our Bibles and we step into the Gospels, and here Jesus' words, Mark 10:45, for the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And oh my goodness, it sounds like this ministry of Jesus is pretty costly. Or Paul's words found in 2 Corinthians, where he describes in 2 Corinthians 1, he describes his ministry as so difficult. The only way he could make it was to rely upon God, chapter 1, verse 9. In chapter 6, 4 through 10, 11, 23 through 28, he describes in great detail, and you folks know this, and I'm not going to read these passages, describes in great detail challenges he faced in his ministry. Terry Walling, who's an author of some fine books dealing with life and ministry, described this period of time with 3 words. He said there's the period of disruption, where we tried to plan something and oh my goodness, we can't do that because we're back online right now, and we tried to do that. Period of disruption, a period of discouragement where church leaders, we were shrugging our shoulders and just saying, we don't know what to do. And the period of depletion or exhaustion. And meanwhile, and this is where we want to be, we're trying to navigate, how do you move forward in faith? What I'd like to talk about for a few moments is how do we move forward? And what I want to really focus on is not so much the congregation per se, but you and me as individuals. Some of you are preachers, some of you serve as elders, some of you are just folks and just trying to navigate life. I have a friend, or had a friend, late Bill Kirk. For years he was an elder at Highland Oaks in Dallas. He was a psychologist, counseled a lot of people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in particular. Bill in Virginia moved to Waco, and I think Bill was about 76 when they made that move. And moved to Waco, where I was preaching there at the Crestview Church of Christ, preaching there. Bill in Virginia became a part of that church. One Monday morning, The receptionist called back at my office. I was kind of at the end of these offices there. And she says, Jim, Dr. Kirk would like to see you. I didn't know him. I didn't know what was up, but it sure was early on Monday morning to get a visit like that. I just kind of thought to myself, And Bill walks into the office and looks at me and says, I'd like to talk to you about your sermon yesterday. And I thought, inside I was thinking, oh man, mentally trying to think through, what did I say? This is what Bill said. He said, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I really enjoyed that sermon yesterday. And I'm wondering how I could do some follow-up reading. Lord, forgive me. And I think I suggested a book or something, and Bill wrote it down in this little card in his pocket, said he was going to order it. And when Bill left, I thought, Lord, how can I be like him when I'm 76? How can I be a person who continues to learn and grow? And what I want to challenge us to do this morning is to think in terms of how do we move forward, what are some best practices, good habits that will enable us to move forward and not get stuck where we are. That's what Bill wasn't. He wasn't stuck. He was alive and learning. So I'm going to make a few suggestions, and I've got, I don't know how many there are actually, but I've got a number of suggestions I'm going to make. And if you find a couple of these helpful, as far as I'm concerned, we've had a good hour, okay? If you can just find a couple that are helpful. Number one, I want to encourage us to return to practicing the spiritual disciplines. I want to read a portion of Scripture from 2 Chronicles 14. 2 Chronicles 14. To return to the spiritual disciplines, the discipline of prayer, discipline of Scripture reading, the discipline of silence, and go on and on with some of these. For some of us, the discipline of journaling. 2 Chronicles chapter 14, verse 2. Asa, king of Judah. This is about Asa, king of Judah. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. It's kind of nice to hear that about one of the kings, did what was good and right. He removed the foreign altars and the high places, smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles. He commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and to obey his laws and commands. He removed the high places and incense altars in every town in Judah, and the kingdom was at peace under him. And he built up the fortified cities of Judah, since the land was at peace. No one was at war with him during those years, for the Lord gave him rest. Let us build up those towns, he said to Judah, and put walls around them with towers and gates and bars. The land is still ours, because we have sought the Lord our God. We have sought him, and he has given us rest on every side. And so they built and prospered. And I look at that and think, now that sounds right. You read in the paper about some minister, somebody somewhere, and it turns out to be a scoundrel, and you think, good grief, what's up with these preachers? And then you look at this wonderful text and you see this good king. And this good king leads the people in seeking the Lord, and God gives them rest, and you think, yeah, that's the way it ought to be. Work and serve in your church, and things go well. Well, You move on to 8 and 9. I'm not going to read all of this, but now Asa does what's right, and what happens? An enemy army approaches him. Zerah, verse 9, the Cushite marched out against them with an army of thousands upon thousands and 300 chariots. And I want to ask, what is up with that? I mean, why can't you leave well? You got a good king and you're doing right and people seeking the Lord. And why do we got to have this thing where this army's coming up against him? Save that for a bad king. Right? Not people like you and me trying to do the right thing. And here's what Asa does. Verse 11. Asa called to the Lord his God and said, Lord, there is no one like you to help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, Lord our God, for we rely on you. And in your name we have come against this vast army, Lord. But you are our God. Do not let mere mortals prevail against you. We go through hard, difficult times in our churches, in our ministries, and we are called to pray. We're called to pray when we don't feel like it, when we do feel like it, but we are called to pray because it is on God. We rely on God. I need to be reminded of that. You see, after some pretty tough couple of years and some tough months, one of the things I want to remember to practice the spiritual disciplines. I want to remember to pray. I can do a lot of worrying, okay? Y'all good at that too? But I want to remember to pray. Here's a second one. This is a wonderful time to return to your central purpose and mission. Return to your central purpose and mission. If you're an elder, ask yourself again, why am I doing this? Sometimes when I'm from Texas, and so I'm going to use sometimes when things are just really going rough, you come out of a meeting and you just think, what is the use? Or from Texas, we would say, well, what is the stinking use? I mean, what's the use? What's the use in preaching to this bunch? What's the use in serving as a shepherd? You don't get appreciated. And I understand those feelings. But this is the time to go back and ask myself, why am I serving this way? Why am I serving in this role? Why am I serving in this capacity? Am I a minister because State Farm wasn't hiring? Or am I a minister because I genuinely believe I am called by God and I am serving the Lord? By the way, regardless who you are, you're serving the Lord. It's also a good time if my church, if I'm looking at a Sunday morning crowd and I'm going, boy, it was 400 a few years ago, it's 200 now, I'm hoping we hold our 200. It's a wonderful time to go back to the mission. What makes a church and what's the point? What's the mission? What are we trying to do? Who are we trying to be? And assume nothing. Third, I want to encourage us to acknowledge the trauma. Acknowledge the trauma. One of the things I don't want to do is to be flippant about somebody else's pain. One of the things we can do is just to respect the pain of others. I can say something in Bible class, make some kind of flippant remark about COVID. That may not be really funny if you've lost somebody near to you. See, what I want to do as a disciple of the Lord is I want to, more important than my opinions, more important than whatever, is a human being created in the image of God. And what they have dealt with, what they've gone through. And it's a wonderful time to preach about suffering, dealing with pain, and learning to persevere. Third, look for what God might be doing here. There's a document entitled the Resilience Report. It's part of the Resilience Leadership Project out of the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology. I like this quote. In the midst of fragmentation, we see opportunity. The shifting spiritual landscape invited a new imagination. One of the things I can do as a shepherd, as a church leader, as a sister, brother, whoever I am, one of the things I can do is I can just bemoan the fact that it's not the way it was, or I can ask, Lord, what are you wanting to do right now? What are you doing right now? And look for how God is working in my own life, in my church. One of the things I would encourage us to do, and we're just talking about practices and habits that can help us move forward, is to learn to rest. To learn to rest. I heard this little quote. I think her name was Jo Saxon. And it's just this one little line. You have one body, and your leadership lives in it. I kind of like that. When I was a young minister, I had more pride than sense, and had more energy than wisdom, and I would just pride myself on how hard I could work. You know? You want to meet me at 6 in the morning? I'll meet you. You want to meet me at 11:30 at night, because that's when you get off? Okay, we'll go have coffee. I mean, my poor wife, and I'd tell, well, he gets off now. And what I would do is just drive myself into the ground physically, thinking that there was something noble about that. And yet the truth is, my leadership lives in my body. And if I don't care for my body, it's going to impact how I serve. I want to learn to rest, to pay attention to my body and my emotions and my relationships and my soul. Some of you know what it is to be in meetings where you're talking to frazzled people who are exhausted. And she or he is just all over the place. And you think, you need to go home and go to bed. I mean, because we're not going to do much good here. You've been in meetings like that, I suspect. Years ago when I was in college, I worked for UPS, loaded those trucks late at night, went back to Denton. I went to the University of North Texas, went back to Denton where I'd go to my 8 o'clock class the next morning. One of the nice things about working for UPS and that particular job is when I was off, I was off. But with these churches, you know what that's like. Wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you wonder, what am I going to say? How am I going to handle this situation with that lady, with that man? One of the best spiritual disciplines that we could pay attention to right now is just simple rest. And the next one I want to mention is just practicing good self-care. Keith and I did grow up together. I was older. He was much younger. And I remember riding in Dallas with my dad on occasion. He had two kinds of cars, a Buick or an Oldsmobile, and they were always clean, very clean. Inside and outside, oh my goodness. And we'd be riding along, and all of a sudden this car would pull up. Oh my God, it was one of those cars. Just nice sound, massive wheels. This dates me, I know. Massive wheels. And I'd say, Daddy, look at that car. That's what I want. And then that car would speed off, and you could hear the little bit of screech of the tires. He'd say something like this: well, it's not going to be around very long if he keeps driving like that. Sounds like a dad, right? Of course, I realized later on he was right. One of the reasons why self-care is so important is because if you're a shepherd, if you're a minister, or you're just in a congregation but you do a lot of work with people, this is tough work. First of all, it requires a lot of emotional stamina. I was in Waco, I don't remember what year it was, but it was one Wednesday afternoon, and there had been a car accident. And I went over to Providence Hospital, and there was a young couple there. She had been driving, a little baby. She's with her baby. And I walked into the ER, and the baby had just died. And I'm a young father. And of course, you know, and I am with these people, and in that situation. And then about an hour and a half later, maybe 2 hours later, I sit in an elders meeting. These guys have just come from work. And they're not saying anything wrong, but it's just kind of frivolous and light. And my emotions have just been through the ringer. And I remember sitting there thinking, how am I supposed to shift gears from wanting to bawl my eyes out to who's going to win the ball game this weekend? Again, they didn't do anything wrong. It's just you've got this kind of emotional whiplash going on. You know what I'm saying? One of the best things you can do for self-care is just recognizing that. Just recognizing that. It requires a lot of relational stamina to serve a church. Here you serve as an elder and somebody who y'all used to go out to eat together. And now he's accusing you of having poor motives and hurt your feelings. I mean, I thought he was my friend. Relational stamina. And you know, in a church, you can't just decide who you're going to speak to, or you're not supposed to. You can't just decide who you're going to speak to. I'll be with this group here. I like them. This bunch, I think I'll go over here. Relational. You've got to interact. And that can wear you out. And again, some of it. Everybody hear this. Some of it is just paying attention to what's happening in you. That you may be worn out from dealing with this guy who is just difficult to deal with. Next, be intentional about looking for moments of joy. Be intentional about looking for moments of joy. See, there's one kind of posture you can take as a Christian leader, and that's, I'm kind of waiting to see when things get better. Well, you just keep waiting. You know, and if you deal with human beings, I don't know. What I'm finding is that I need to be intentional about these moments of joy. Do y'all have some people in your life that when you're around them or you talk to them, you just feel better? Yeah. My grandkids are like that. I mean, I've got 4 of these grandchildren, 2 in Memphis, 2 in Oklahoma City. And with the beauty of FaceTime where we can look at one another, and the youngest is a little red-headed girl, almost 2 years old. Or I'll talk to one of them and he'll tell me about football. Just moments of joy. Moments of joy. Some of you, I'm going to tell you something, and some of you are going to think it's silly, but it's okay. Back a long time ago, when I was in Waco, this guy calls me one afternoon. He's in construction. And he said, let's go see the Rangers play. We can get there in time for the game to start. Great. Okay, Scott. So Scott and I get in his truck. Off we go to Ranger Stadium there in Arlington. We walk into the ballpark. Now, I am dead serious. We walk into the ballpark, and it is dollar hot dog night. We didn't know it. And he looked at me, and we were like 2 little kids. We walked up to the concession deal, and we both said the same thing: I'll take 3. Just something about, I never eat 3 hot dogs, but that night. And we laughed and laughed. It's probably been 20 years ago. About 10 weeks ago, I called Scott one afternoon, and I said, Scott, is it dollar hot dog night? And he laughed and he said, man, if it is, I'm ready to go. Now see what that did for a moment for me. It brought back just a moment of joy. And there are a few people like that I'll call. And I said, do you remember when we would have the contest back in graduate school at how many ribs we could eat? We measured how high the bones were, and we just laugh. I want to tell you, ministry in a church can be really hard. Now, my examples may do nothing for you. You get your own. But to look for moments of joy that are yours and that you can dip into, and just for a moment you grin. I want to encourage us as we look at the future to have friendships with low expectations. Now, I've got some high maintenance friends. Do you all have that? I love them, but you know, things kind of have to be so-so, and sometimes I say the wrong thing. But then there are friends that are just so low maintenance and low expectation, and they're a treasure. Do you know the kind of people I'm talking about? Low expectation friends, where you get together and, you know, the first thing out of their mouth is not, well, I wondered when you were going to finally call. You get together and we talk like, you know, maybe it's been a while, but we talk like it's old times again. I need people like that in my life. I want to be this kind of person for my wife and my children. want to be this kind of person for others. Sometimes ministers, sometimes elders can be lone rangers, you know, where I just kind of feel like I'm by myself and I'm on my own. One of the things I've found helpful is just send a person a short note, thinking about you, thinking about the time we played golf, blah, 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 thinking about the time we fished, thinking about the time we preached together, thinking about. Sometimes when I'm on my way home from work, there's a guy in Abilene I'll call. And again, this is the relationship. I'll call him and I'll say, first thing out of my mouth, I'll say, Larry, what are y'all eating tonight? No hello or anything. Just, what are y'all eating tonight? He'll say, I've been thinking about that and I'm not sure. You see, it's just low expectation friendship. And we'll talk maybe 10 minutes. And then, I want to encourage us to be willing to talk to somebody. That may be talking to a therapist. I've seen a therapist. I saw a therapist for a short time in Waco when I was in Kansas City for a time there. It's very helpful. Wasn't a big deal. It was just I was just stuck and needed some help. Sometimes it might be just talking to a mentor. Somebody who could kind of coach you through something. Sometimes that can be helpful. Sometimes it's a spiritual director. Sometimes it might just be a wise friend. Sometimes it's talking to somebody who can help you with your physical health. Especially, if you just need to take better care of your body, and your friend seems to be on top of that. But the willingness to talk to somebody can really be helpful. One practice that can be very helpful is to commit to being a non-anxious presence or a less anxious presence. Some of that comes out of family systems theory, that language. But we live in a very highly anxious culture, right? And our churches can be very, very anxious. And anxiety just feeds on raw emotion. And when it finds raw emotion, it often does some interesting things in us and in our churches. When church leaders, when ministers are very anxious, sometimes we kind of go to two extremes. Some of us go out here and we detach. The Lone Ranger preacher who forces himself to be with people, but just as soon would be by himself most of the time, just detach. And the other end of that is sometimes when we're very anxious, we get enmeshed. I crave so much to be liked that I'm going to work really hard to convince you that I'm like you, and so maybe you'll think I'm okay. And I'm just enmeshed. Sometimes in churches, we will ask the question, which I understand, we ask the question, what do we need to do right now? When sometimes we need to back away and ask the question, what are we observing? What are we observing? As one elder said to me one time, or said to our group one time, it was late on a Wednesday night and we were at one another's throats, in a Christian sort of way. We were at one another's throats, and this elder finally said, guys, we don't do this. This isn't the way we act. We're tired, we're worn out, and we're worried. Let's break this thing up and try it again later, some other time. He was right. But see, what he was doing is not asking the question, what do we do next? He was trying to ask, what can we observe here? And he observed a group of anxious people. One of the things I want to do as a person who is trying to mature emotionally is I want to learn to be calm, and I want to learn to stay connected with others in the church, not detached, but stay connected emotionally. And I want to be clear. So we might say something like this. This is what I think, this is what I believe, and this is what you can expect as we move forward. Church, this is what you can expect as we move forward. This is what we think, what we believe. Will you get pushback? Of course you will. But you are working to be calm and connected and clear. I'm going to wrap this up. Number 3 is to learn to be more discerning about social media. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. To be more discerning. There's nothing wrong with being on social media. I am. Many of you are, I suspect. Sometimes, though, it has a way of just draining the life out of us. And what I had to do, one of the things I did during this 2-year period is I stopped reading certain people, including church members. I don't need to hear this person's perspective on blah, 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 blah. Wear me out. And just get me all worked up and angry. I don't need that. Life's hard enough. Again, I'm not saying stay off social media. I'm just suggesting we be a little more discerning. And then finally, to create helpful routines or structures. This came from Rick Warren. I heard this little clip of something he did not long ago where he recommended this, and I think it's really good to create. When you live with so much uncertainty and so much of the unknown, if you can create some structure for yourself. For instance, one of the things I did is I created more structure in my early morning routine, what I do with the spiritual disciplines and journaling and prayer and reading. I needed more structure, and it helped. Now, you've been very patient. Thank you. I hope a couple of those are helpful. If you can flush the rest of those, maybe a couple are helpful. I want to read 2 passages and then want to just encourage us. First passage comes from Romans 12, 9 through 13. This comes from Eugene Peterson's The Message. Love from the center of who you are. Don't fake it. Run for dear life from evil. Hold on for dear life to good. Be good friends who love deeply and practice playing second fiddle. Don't burn out. Keep yourself fueled and aflame. Be alert servants of the Master, cheerfully expectant. Don't quit in hard times. Pray all the harder. Help needy Christians be inventive in hospitality. And then Philemon 7, where the writer says, your love has given me great joy and encouragement, because you, brother, have refreshed the hearts of the Lord's people. I want to encourage us 3 things. I want to encourage us as Christian people to be champions for our ministers. To champion our ministers. And it's true what Keith said. There are a number who have left. No judgment here on that. But for those who are in our churches, could we champion who they are and what they're doing? Second, could we champion our elders who serve and serve and serve and then feel like they're in the crosshairs of these competing groups out here, and they continue to serve? Could we champion them? And finally, could we champion our congregations? Has there been loss? Oh, yeah. Some of you have been or are a part of congregations where there have been deaths and just hard things to deal with over the last couple of years. Some of you are part of congregations. You know what it is to remember 400 and now there are 200. To remember 100 and now there are 50. But could we champion these congregations and say, all is not lost. God is at work. Let's be a people who are gathered around the mission of God and see what God will do next. I believe that. But it's going to take a group like this to champion these people. And may God give us strength and perseverance to do just that. Thanks for being here on this Saturday morning. And if you can take away a couple of nuggets from some of that, wonderful. And if not, that's all I got.